Difficulty in video games seems to be a pretty divisive topic. Some players want a tough challenge that will test your mental fortitude, whereas others just want to sit back on the couch after a long day of work to an easygoing experience. There's no right or wrong way to enjoy a game, and there's a time and place for both. If you are a fan of difficult games though, specifically JRPGs, then, well, you've come to the right place, my friend. Now, these aren't going to be the absolute hardest games the genre has to offer. However, they will be ones that I found fairly challenging and certainly above average. Some of you in the comments will probably be like, dude, this game isn't even hard, you suck, skill issue, and I mean, yeah, maybe, I don't know. Congrats, dude, you're better at a video game than me, I guess.
What you do, Basil?
Obviously, difficulty comes in all shapes and forms, so I'm gonna try to include both games that have complex mechanics that require mastering of their intricate systems, and games that are just good old-fashioned, grindy hard. Without further ado, let's just get into it. Here's an unranked list of 8 great, difficult JRPGs that will challenge you.
The light is your guide.
A dream is what keeps you going.
Now is the time to shape your story. Your fate is in your hands.
To start off this list, we have Saga Frontier II. Saga Frontier II was developed by Squaresoft and came out in 2000 for the PS1. A lot of Saga games could have fit here, but out of the ones that I played, Saga Frontier II is probably the hardest. Well, the most fun, hardest, that is. Unlimited Saga is just confusing hard and not really a good time. That's not to say Saga Frontier II isn't confusing though. For better or for worse, it definitely is to an extent and has a steep learning curve, hence its place in this video. The game doesn't do that good of a job at explaining all this stuff either and leaves a lot to you to figure out yourself. Make no mistake, this is one of those games you'll probably have to refer to outside sources to really learn everything. It's kind of an interesting juxtaposition because the absolutely gorgeous hand-painted watercolor art style makes it seem like this would be a really cozy, easygoing, and relaxing experience, and, well, if you play this game, you know that's not the case. Saga Frontier 2 will kick your ass and will require you to learn the depth of its systems. There are 3 different types of battles: single character battles, group battles, and army battles. The latter doesn't happen that often though. I guess this is kinda similar to Suikoden actually. Never made that comparison before. Anyway, single character battles have you inputting commands to create potential combos. These are a bit obtuse to figure out however. You can then use these combos in group battles as well as items, magic, and stuff like that. Resource management is a huge part of combat as most things are quite limited. This includes breakable weapons, a very finite amount of magic due to how the system works, and limited opportunities to visit shops. There's also some more unique aspects like every character being able to equip and having different proficiencies with all weapon types, and being able to learn new skills with them. Visible enemies on screen is a nice touch too. Oh yeah, there's no traditional level ups either. You'll just get HP gains and stat growth on occasion. It's not random, but it's not easy to explain either. Same with the combat as a whole, honestly. I just gave you a very simplified version here. And it's a lot deeper than I'm making it sound. Trust me though, it is tough. Kind of unfairly so at times actually. I'll just say, make multiple saves. Sometimes you can get yourself in an unwinnable situation with no way to go back. Given the difficulty is the main subject of this video, I'm not going to go into too much detail on stuff like story and music, but I will give my very brief thoughts. This goes for the other entries as well. But yeah, the music here is insanely good, one of Masashi's best works for sure. Story-wise, I am a fan of following multiple characters across multiple generations, but when it came to the execution, I feel it could have been a little bit better. It's also not as non-linear as other Saga games. Not really a good or a bad thing, just a thing. Given that the first Saga Frontier got a remaster not too long ago, I wouldn't be surprised if Saga Frontier 2 follows suit soon. Coming up next, we have the 7th Saga. The 7th Saga was developed by the company Produce and came out for the Super Nintendo in 1993. Out of all the games on this list, the 7th Saga probably has the most infamous reputation. It's widely considered to be the hardest Super Nintendo RPG, at least in North America. Speaking of North America, it's specifically that version that we're talking about today. They made this version a lot harder than the Japanese version. I've sort of read conflicting things on the exact numbers, but I believe they made enemies stronger, cut your level up stat gains in half, and they removed the stat bonuses you get later in the game while keeping them for your rivals. You see, in the 7th Saga, you start as one of 7 characters. One of these other characters can join you later as a companion, but the others that don't join can become your rivals. They set out on the same quest as you, and eventually, you will have to fight them. Their level scales to yours, so if you get too overpowered for this first fight, due to the removal of the later level stat bonuses, this fight can almost become impossible to win. You'll either need extremely lucky RNG, or you'll just have to start over. I'm not joking. After this fight though, you can start grinding without worry. And yeah, on that note, even outside the specific moment, this game is just hard and grindy as hell. Choosing certain characters makes the game very difficult. I would have loved to see the drop-off rate for this game. I bet so many people chose a weaker starting character, died in the first random battle, and just gave up. If you can stick it out though, there's a pretty interesting game here. I wouldn't say it's amazing, but it's not bad. It's definitely got some interesting parts. It is very much an old school RPG, however. It almost feels more like an NES RPG in terms of design over an SNES one. So yeah, if you're not into that sort of thing, this one may not be for you. The story is kinda subpar, music is just okay. Yeah, this one's definitely just for old school RPG lovers. I did like that little map in the corner that shows you where encounters are at though. That was a nice touch for sure. Anyway, I think you guys get the idea, this one's for you or not. Let's move on. Coming up next, we have Resonance of Fate. Resonance of Fate was developed by Tri-Ace and was originally released for the Xbox 360 and PS3, however has since seen an enhanced port to the PS4 and Steam. This is another one that's quite complex and not explained very well. There is a tutorial, but yeah, it's optional and not that helpful. You'll probably have to look up some stuff online if you want to fully understand this system. Combat is like a combination of turn-based and real-time and a very unique mix at that. It's all about using guns and grenades and items, and different types of weapons will either do HP damage or scratch damage. The latter is kinda like a shield you need to deplete first before you can start focusing on their HP. While you can just shoot enemies running about the battlefield, you're gonna want to make use of hero actions. This allows you to jump from one point to the next and shoot a bunch of enemies in the process. It adds a very cinematic flair to battle. It's pretty cool. Performing hero actions uses up bezel points though, which is kind of like your stamina. If you run out, you can no longer perform hero actions and move slower on the battlefield. You gotta gain these bezel points back by defeating enemies and whatnot. There's also these things called tri-attacks, but they just require a lot of prerequisites to set up and would just take too long to explain. Again, this is another game that once you learn everything, it's not that difficult. However, getting to that point is where the real challenge comes from. When you combine this complex battle system with the weird hex-based progression world map system and the pretty different weapon upgrade system, you have quite the original experience in Resonance of Fate. I'm not that huge on the story and it definitely suffers from that super drab PS3 era color palette. However, the gameplay is bound to resonate with some.
Dangerous line of work you're in.
Coming up next, we have Shin Megami Tensei Strange Journey, just the original on the DS. The 3DS version Redux is much easier. Out of every Shin Megami Tensei game, Strange Journey is often considered to be one of the hardest. Atlus was not fucking around with this one. It's difficult for two main reasons: the extremely hard boss fights and the dungeons. These dungeons are no joke. If you're not a fan of dungeon crawlers, this one's not for you. There's a lot of environmental effects like ground hazards and teleporters and darkness and stuff like that. When it comes to the combat, Strange Journey is one of the few games in the SMT series not to use the press turn system. Instead, it uses the Demon Co-op system. Reminiscent of old SMT games, there are 3 alignments: chaotic, neutral, and lawful. If you attack an enemy's weakness, the demons you have in your party of the same alignment of that character will also attack them as well. It's fairly simple, but it does add a little more strategy to the usual turn-based system. Even though the press turn system isn't here, demon fusing still is. Fusing demons is important in every SMT game, but in this one, it's really important. Seriously, fuse, fuse, fuse. It's the key to success in this game. Demons do not gain new skills by leveling up, so this is the only way. It also helps you get demons with the proper alignment you want. And yeah, you will need these for the boss fights, as they are tough. The endgame in particular is especially brutal. But considering you clicked on this video, I think you're up for the challenge. So yeah, if you're in the mood for a hard-as-nails first-person dungeon crawler with a really atmospheric, sci-fi, supernatural-like setting, then I highly recommend Strange Journey. To start off the second half of this list, we have another PS1 Squaresoft RPG with Vagrant Story. I wouldn't say that Vagrant Story is like super difficult once you get the hang of it, but getting the hang of it is really difficult. This game just doesn't not hold your hand. It loses you at the mall and ignores all the following announcements on the intercom because it just doesn't give a fuck. It's very complex with a lot of depth and not explained well at all. Where to even begin? To be honest, I'm gonna have to give a pretty surface level description here, because if I were to try to describe all the intricacies of combat, that would be like a whole video itself. The battle system has you attacking different parts of enemies with different weapons based on their weaknesses. Before each attack, you can't see the hit percentage and how much damage you will do. Aspects like the weapon type, the affinity, the enemy type, all play a factor. Basically, you try to chain attacks together in this rhythm-like system. Chaining abilities does increase your risk meter though. The higher this gets, the higher your critical hit chances as well, but the lower your accuracy is. You also take more damage from enemies. So yeah, there's kind of a risk-reward element at play here. Focusing on weakening certain parts of the body can have a multitude of effects as well. The same thing goes for you. This is displayed by the little player icon in the lower left. For example, if your head is damaged enough to where it's red, you cannot cast magic, and each body part has its own effect. Oh yeah, magic is a whole nother beast too. There's also a pretty deep weapon crafting system with some mechanics that were ahead of its time. There's just a lot to explain here. I can't touch on everything, but yeah, just know that it's very deep and very unique. One thing I will say though, you will be going through menus often. Tedium is kind of a big part of Vagrant Story, and to make matters worse, some of these menus are not very intuitive. If you can look past this though and take the time to learn all of its systems, there is an incredibly deep game here. Not only that, but it's a cinematic masterpiece with great music, amazing atmosphere, and an engaging, mature story. If complexity is your thing, Vagrant Story comes highly recommended. The next game we have on our list is Baten Kaitos Origins. Baten Kaitos Origins was developed by Tricrescendo and Monolith Soft and was originally released for the GameCube back in 2006. However, has since seen a remaster for the Switch in 2023. That's probably the version you're gonna want to get unless you want to cough up some serious moolah. God, GameCube games are so expensive now. This is actually a prequel to the first Baten Kaitos game, so even though it came out after it, you can still play it first. The original Baten Kaitos was kind of hard too, but really only in certain difficulty spikes. Baten Kaitos Origins still has some difficulty spikes, but it's just harder as a whole, period. It was when I fought against Giacomo really early in the game that I was just like, okay, this game can be pretty fucking hard. This dude kicked my ass like 5 to 10 times in a row, I'm not even joking. It's not even just bosses though. Even random encounters can end in the game over if you're not prepared and have bad luck. The thing is, the game doesn't really explain how to optimally use the battle system. In fact, it almost kinda misleads you. The combat is a card-based, turn-based system. It appears similar on the surface to that of the first game, but in execution, plays out quite differently. Instead of each character having their own deck of cards, every character shares the same deck. There's attack cards, defense cards, healing cards, and stuff like that. Basically, you want to string together combos with your attack cards. As the game advances, you can add more total cards to your deck, and this is where problems start occurring. Considering you gradually unlock it, it makes it seem like more cards would be better, right? Well, actually, no. As I always say, less is more. If you use the max 60 cards, you're gonna have a bad time. In an already unpredictable battle system that lies on some RNG, throwing more cards into the mix just creates more uncertainty. It just makes it harder to create combos and for healing items to pop up. Really, you want to try to eliminate as much random chance as possible. I recommend using more like 20 to 30 cards. This is a pretty good sweet spot, I feel. With all this said, don't let this RNG aspect scare you away though. Because of the unpredictability and fast speed at which battles play out, there's always this tension that never goes away no matter how strong you are or who you're facing. It just makes every battle play out differently and cuts back on the repetitiveness that some turn-based systems can suffer from. Apparently, this was the exact intention of one of the designers and, well, job well done. There's not really another turn-based system quite like this one. Same with the atmosphere too, dude, good lord. Truly, one of the most visually creative worlds I've ever seen. Those pre-rendered backgrounds, man, I just love it. The music is also really good, and the story is, it's not bad. Again, it has promise, but execution-wise, I felt it could have been a little better. But yeah, if you want a challenging card-based RPG though, Baten Kaitos Origins is where you want to go.
This'll do.
The next game we have on our list is Final Fantasy IV, specifically the DS version. Square Enix released this version all the way back in 2008, and not only is it the hardest version of Final Fantasy IV, but it's also just one of the hardest Final Fantasy games, period. Out of the ones I've played, it probably is the hardest actually. It's not just harder because they increased the numbers though. It's balanced completely differently from the original. A lot of spells and abilities have different functions now, and there's also the addition of augments. These allow you to learn new abilities, swap them out, and stuff like that. Because of these changes, they obviously had to rework a lot of the balancing. A lot of the enemy and boss patterns were changed. So much so, in fact, the designers wanted to make sure that some strategies that worked in the original wouldn't work here. Mechanics like buffs and debuffs and status effects are very important in this version. Most of the difficulty comes from utilizing these aspects, as opposed to just pure grinding. Buffs and debuffs have always kind of had their uses, but yeah, if you're someone who's always found the lack of status effect relevancy a problem in Final Fantasy games, then, well, this one's for you. Fair warning though, that does go for both sides. Petrification and instant death spells are abundant, so yeah, watch out. It's also worth noting that this version includes 2 new optional super bosses. That's pretty cool. And yeah, in terms of the story, characters, and music, we all know Final Fantasy IV is an absolute classic for good reason. Like you don't need someone to explain to you why Thriller was a banger, right? Final Fantasy IV was really ahead of its time, and is still a great playthrough today. And if you want the hardest version, this is it. And to finish off this list, we have Phantasy Star II. Phantasy Star II was released for the Genesis and was developed by Sega. It can be played on pretty much any modern console though, via the Genesis collection. Phantasy Star II is a sequel to the first game, however, it takes place way after the events of that one, so you don't really have to play the first one first. You will miss out on some references though. With that said, I do think it's the hardest in the series, hence why I wanted to include it here. Being an old school RPG, Phantasy Star II is pretty damn grindy, even more so than a lot of its contemporaries. However, that's not the main reason why it's on this list. If you play this game, you know what I'm about to say. The dungeons. These dungeons are insane. If you want to do it the old-fashioned way, you're gonna have to draw maps. Seriously, you will get lost without them. They're like giant labyrinths, but even worse because David Bowie's not there to greet you at the end and sing you a song. Man, look at that throw. Dude's got the graceful motion and natural athleticism of the kid from Rookie of the Year.
Mom, watch this! Wait!
Is pitching.
Gosh, Henry, you can play for the Cubs!
Now, if you want to do things a more modern way, there are maps online. I wouldn't blame you either, the game is still tough, even with them. Honestly, they were the only way I was able to beat the game. If you're one of the legends who beat this the natural way back in the day, or even recently, leave a comment below. Your greatness needs to be recognized, and we must pay respects. For real though, that's quite the JRPG badge of honor. But yeah, if you're just looking for a tough as nails, grindy as hell, old school RPG, you could certainly do a lot worse than Phantasy Star II. Plus, I just really love the art style and overall vibe of this game. It really captures that cozy, late 80s anime, nostalgic retro feel. It's quite the special atmosphere, for sure. Alright, and that about wraps up this video. Thanks for watching everyone, we hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please either consider hitting that like button or subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. What are some difficult JRPGs that have kicked your ass before? Let us know in the comments below. Maybe we'll do a part 2 eventually. As always, just want to give a huge thank you to our Patreon supporters, and of course an extra special shout out to our top patrons, Derek Drost, Jesse Spencer, Jump Rock, and Zaino. All your support and generosity is very much appreciated. Other than that, thanks again for watching everyone, and hope you have an awesome day. This is Corbin from Gaming Productions. Until next time.